All right, then. Thank you so much for staying with us. The federal government, through the Ministry of Labor and Employment, began the reconciliation meeting yesterday, Monday, to resolve the dispute between Dangote Refinery and the Petroleum and Natural Gas Senior Staff Association of Nigeria. The meeting was chaired by Mr. Mohammed Angiyandi, who is the Minister of Labor and Employment, and the leadership of PENGASSAN. Dangote Refinery's that's the Petroleum Minister, that's the Minister of Finance, and key directors of the Nigerian Upstream Regulatory Commission, NUPRC, and the Nigerian Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority, NMDPRA, in attendance. Now, in his remarks, the minister said the meeting was crucial to ensure that the dispute did not have an adverse effect on Nigeria's population. He also expressed shocks that the association's strike was ongoing, leaving oil and gas institutions on the lock. Staying on this same issue, you know, it's really a very big one. But my guest this time is Dr. Chinan Dikwal. He's the vice chair at the African Energy Council. Dr. Dikwal, thank you so much for being here. He joins me from Doha. It's good to have you in. Good afternoon.
Hi, Tolu. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes. Did we know that we would get to this point? You know, we've always commended Dangote Refinery for this investment. But first, it was the truck owners that started with the argument back and forth with regards to his CNG trucks that he brought into the country. Now it's PENGASSAN coming in and saying you would allow our members or you allow your staff to unionize. So all of this becoming a very big issue here in Nigeria. How does it come to you being a player in this industry?
Well, you ask a very good question, and I must say, you must be an analyst yourself. And I'll say, ask the question in the right sequence. You say that. You see, anybody who is an analyst and looks at this to try to understand it can see that this is a small fire. It's been raging on and it's growing and it's becoming a big fire. Exactly what you described there. You know, over the last few, we had Nupe, who started, you know, the Dangote, Ipman came in, we've had Datman, we've had, several. Right now, Nupe is the one who's concerned. It's just been a growing fire over the last few. Now, PENGASSAN, you know, the big boy who played this now come into the game. And I'll say this actually, this surprised many people. PENGASSAN might not be the worst that we'll see because organized labor, the NLC, is also sick. They haven't said anything as yet, say that they're going to join, but they've certainly given some endorsements. So it could get even much bigger. I'm talking simply from an analysis. But I'll say this to him. Even Dangote himself, I think about 2 years ago, he said it very clearly that he's a fighter. And he anticipates and knows that this situation is going to snowball and get out of control. And going to become to be part. So here we are. We are here at the center of it, where you have big interests that are really going to be satisfied. Now, I'm not talking for one or the other. I'm going to say this. I've heard many of you guests, and I've seen a lot of the interviews you've done. Many people have given comments. What's happening in Nigeria? I would look at it. You see, anytime disruption is happening, these sort of things will show their heads. What do I mean by disruption? Not forget, for a long time, the main player on this block has been it's refineries, fuel stations, and all of that stuff. The monopoly in terms of fuel supply, whether it's depots and all of that. All of Nigeria's energy infrastructure is changing. And because it's changing, it's really natural that we start to see this kind of issues that are happening today. And I'll say this, many people do not realize, but when disruption happened, even in Nigeria, we've seen this many times. I'll give you an example. Go back to the early 1990s. The biggest banks in Nigeria, the biggest banks, you were talking UBA, you were talking about Union Bank, you were talking about Wema Bank, people were banks. They dominated everything, dominated the banking landscape. Unfortunately, they were released. Paper-based. If you wanted to go to the bank, you have to take your worker, you have to take excuse for the whole day to go and queue up before you get your money. Open an account, 3 minutes. They were easily disrupted in the early 2000s by the Zenith, by the access points. the oceanics, all this new generation banks that came, slick branding. You open your bank account on the day. When you go, you open it up on the day. The worker, you don't go to the bank. It's literally 30 minutes, and then you're back to your desk. They were quick, they were efficient, they easily interrupted Union Bank and the rest of it. Today, as we speak, these same guys, Zenith and all of that, are being disrupted by PayPal. They're being disrupted by Flutterwave. It's a cycle that goes on move on, but yeah, it's exactly the same thing as in oil and gas, with all due respect. Had a monopoly in terms of oil supply for a long time. This monopoly, many people are profited from it, it's been enjoyed. Ukraine was the biggest, if you ask me, the biggest union in the whole of the space, even when not a single drop of oil was being produced in Refinery, or Capital Refinery, it was the interests of workers. Ukraine was politicized with all the respect. And they didn't during Abacha, they played a very big role. You know that so well. When the refineries came off for sale, they had the veto power, and they made sure that it didn't happen. So when the refinery, I think that's they made sure that sale. They were really powerful in a government setting. Unfortunately, today, the system has changed. You now have a private player who has put $20 billion of his money to build a refinery, and because he's a government and he has no he has a completely different strategy, to be honest. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong, because the Nigerian labor law allows people to realize that's the right thing to do. Equally, the ILO, the International Labour Convention, allows that. This man has lots of money, and he's looking for a way to provide service to Nigerian people, also to remain in business. So I think that function is something that we're seeing here and there, and it's not an easy one to deal with. I'm going to say, honestly, the Ministry of Productivity, Labour Productivity, it's a very difficult job, because on one side, you have a private investor that you have to encourage, and we have to see you encouraging him, because he's put a lot of money down. On the other hand, you have a union that you have to protect, Nigerians, also the century. So it's a very difficult balance here.
Let's take a break, and when we come back, we'll continue this conversation. All right, glad to have you back. Dr. Chinan Dikwal is my guest, Vice Chair, Africa Energy Council. Yeah, so now moving to my next question is the disruption that this will cause. Now, Dangote, I'm talking about PENGASSAN, has decided to cut supply of gas, and already we hear that there's been a shutdown in some of the sections of the refinery, because if PENGASSAN should make do of its threat, then that will be worse. Once crude doesn't get to the refinery and all, then nothing would happen in that refinery. And they are yet to get settled on the other side. Let's now talk about the masses, what this means for the masses.
So this is, I think this is where it becomes very most. In all of this, big players like Dangote, the other side, and all the other unions, the people who will suffer in the middle is the Nigerian population. Because yes, Dangote said that he had a strategic concern. That means that crude oil can be supplied still. So that means that petroleum products can still be supplied. But unfortunately, that's running out as we speak. So there's a big chance that over the next few, we can start to see fuel tubes starting. We can start to see fuel, inflation, full inflation. We can start to see black. I think that's the one that's actually a lot more, difficult to imagine. You can start to see blackout. So yes, the refinery, because they've cut down, oil supply to it. Yes, that shut down. There are issues with that. But when we start to have gas being pumped into the grid, the gas generators and the turbines, I think is where the big problem is. From an energy security standpoint, this presents a very big problem, because the PIE 2021 says very clearly, there is a domestic supply obligation. Okay, domestic refineries in Nigeria. That is a lot we have today. So anybody who goes off and shuts that down, entirely is threatening the national security of Nigeria. And here we have seen that that's been done already. Anybody who goes to curtail gas supply to the Nigerian is the national security of Nigeria. And we should see sanctions. And we should see penalties for making it happen. Don't think in the same country we should allow these sort of things to happen. So unfortunately, I think the brunt of it is going to be faced by we ordinary Nigerians, unfortunately, in the short term.
Now, moving forward with this, the issue of monopoly is also an argument of some. Some say if things continue this way, a particular company might take over distribution, housing of products, and all of the value chain in the entire oil and gas industry. And so it's like a fight for survival for those that are actually fighting now. What do you think for energy security? Monopolizing the industry, is that the way to go?
A bit of a different take to that. First of all, I disagree with the premise. It's a monopoly. Completely disagree with that. I do not see it. Now, I'll say this, I'll say why. You see, I spoke about disruption. I spoke about business innovation. This is business innovation at its core. If you talk about monopoly, let's go back 5 years ago. We only had one way of taking crude, from the import jetties all the way into the hinterlands. That's a monopoly. For a long time, there were certain people who had a monopoly. Japan was a only way to get all the way to the last track. It was free to do. That was a monopoly. Unfortunately, they have been disrupted. Talking about monopoly, I do not agree with that. I disagree with that thesis. I think the way to look at this is simply and he's put down his money to provide food and energy security to Nigerians. If anybody has any counter thought to that, they should also do exactly the same. We have refineries that should be up for sale. We have refineries that you can bid for today. You don't want to come to that market. So I think the whole talk of monopoly, in my view, I just do not see it. I think this is business innovation. I think this is business disruption. Now, I'll say this very clearly. In terms of what Dangote is doing, taking crude from Lekki in 4,000 trips all the way forward, through all parts of Nigeria. I'll say this very clearly. I'm an analyst. I know that I understand this really well. There's no doubt that he's looking to make all the lines and that man and their depots redundant. In the short term, that's the play. He'd make them redundant. Don't forget, even though he's transporting with these trucks, truck transportation is probably one of the most expensive in the world. It's just the truth. It's one of the most expensive. Problem is, what that man have got, they've put a lot of artificial inefficiencies in there, which means that they are even more expensive than trucking, which Dangote is doing. There's no doubt, and I know that just simply looking at markets, that once he runs them out of the market, he will come back to those assets. It's just a pure play game of economics. That happens all the time. Now, if that happens, to the degree that he's trying to consolidate, but his consolidation is not one way he's buying things horizontally. He's not horizontally integrating. He's backward integrating in a vertical way. And I think that's a bit different. So to the people who talk about monopoly, I think they should go and find ways to compete in the market, as opposed to, trying to shut down the country. I disagree with that.
Finally, let's move our conversation to the entire crude oil market and see what's been playing out with regards to the price. We still see that flip-flop in the market, despite the fact that countries are also, we are moving towards the end of the year, and that issue of what do you make of the entire crude oil market and the price at this time?
Crude oil prices stabilized around 69, 68 over the last few. We've seen that 91. I think there have been several factors that you saw that last week. We're on shut. That was the first one that we saw. Oil price moved slightly because Russia continued on stream some of the supplies. The last 2 days, we saw Russia come up with a massive offensive in Ukraine. The price have been going back and forth. I think these are pushing down a bit. I think if you look into the medium term, what's very clear to many of us here is this, that the market is becoming oversupplied. The market is becoming oversupplied. We expect that there will be a downward pressure on price. So going into Q4, like we are right now, I think we can start to see a bit of weakening in terms of the price. And also, Tolu, you know this so well, usually Q4 is when things slow down from a crude oil standpoint. I'm sure market happens, because Q4 people don't travel a lot. In the summer months, people travel around to go and see their relatives and loved ones. In the winter months, not so much. So I think in the short term, we expect that price would dip a little bit. And I'm saying this because it's so important. Government then needs to start to plan this into, sort of our fiscals. If Q4 plan.
All right there, Dr. Chinandikwa, I must thank you so much for your time on the program. Dr. Chiwal is the Vice Chair of Africa Energy Council. Apologies for the interference.